tried to drown me. Now watch me rise.
The water around Calvin Draper's helmet turned black the moment someone cut his ground cable. 40 feet below the Columbia River's surface, sparks erupted from his welding torch as raw electricity coursed through the bridge's steel framework. His wetsuit began to smoke. The taste of copper flooded his mouth as voltage searched for earth through his body instead of the severed grounding wire. Training saved him. Calvin extinguished the torch, grabbed the bridge's concrete piling, and rode the current to the surface, gasping. His dive tender, Jimmy Rourke, hauled him onto the work barge. "Jesus Christ, Cal! Your ground wire's been cut clean through." Calvin stripped off his helmet, salt water and adrenaline burning his throat. The cable hadn't frayed or worn through. Someone had sliced it with a blade, leaving the copper strands bright and sharp. "Who was topside when I went down?" Jimmy checked his log. "Just me and that new county inspector, Deputy Kellum." Mason Kellum, Calvin knew the name. His wife Naomi had mentioned Mason more than once lately. Always with that particular smile she wore when hiding something. Back home in Shroud's Point, their two-story house overlooked the river through windows that hadn't been cleaned in months. Naomi's BMW sat in the driveway, engine still warm. She'd been out again. Calvin found her in the kitchen, pouring wine into a glass already lipstick-stained. Her boutique clothes were wrinkled, her hair mussed despite the expensive salon cut. "How was work, honey?" she asked without looking up. "Someone tried to end me today." Naomi paused, wine halfway to her lips. "What do you mean?" "Cut my ground cable during a dive. Could have been electrocuted." She set down the glass. "That's terrible. Are you okay?" Her concern sounded practiced, like she'd rehearsed caring. Calvin studied her face, the way her eyes darted toward the window, how her fingers drummed against the counter. "I'm fine. Just shaken up." "Well, maybe you should consider a different line of work. Underwater welding is dangerous." "It's dangerous when someone sabotages your equipment." Naomi picked up her wine again. "You're being paranoid. These things happen." That night, Calvin lay awake listening to his wife's breathing. Around midnight, she started talking in her sleep. Insurance, clean exit. Won't suspect. He'd heard her sleep talk before, usually nonsense about clients at her boutique. But this felt different, purposeful. The next morning, Naomi left early for a supplier meeting in Portland. Calvin waited 30 minutes, then drove to her shop, Naomi's boutique, inherited from her aunt 3 years ago. The place sold overpriced clothes to wives of local contractors and mill workers. The shop was empty except for teenage Emma, who worked part-time. "Mrs. Draper won't be back until tomorrow," Emma said, not looking up from her phone. Calvin nodded and browsed the racks, making small talk while studying the glass display case where Naomi kept expensive jewelry. Perfect surface for fingerprints. When Emma went to the bathroom, he pressed a piece of clear tape against the glass where Naomi's palm prints would be, then dusted it with graphite from a pencil. The prints lifted clean. That evening, he checked their joint bank account online. 3 withdrawals in the past month, each for $2,000. Cash, no explanation. Naomi came home late, claiming her car had broken down in Portland, but the BMW's engine was cold when she pulled in, and there was no mechanic's receipt. "I called AAA," she said. "They jumped the battery." Calvin knew batteries. A jump wouldn't take 6 hours. The next day, he visited Bart Kessler, his only friend from high school. Bart had been a notary public until he got caught falsifying documents for a payday loan scheme. Now he worked repo, seizing cars and boats from people who'd missed payments. They met at Kelly's Diner, a grease-stained place near the docks that served coffee strong enough to dissolve rust. "Haven't seen you in months," Bart said, sliding into the booth across from Calvin. "How's married life?" "Complicated." "Aren't they all?" Bart stirred sugar into his coffee. "What's eating you?" Calvin pulled out his phone and showed Bart a photo of the cut ground cable. "Someone tried to fry me yesterday." Bart examined the image. "That's a clean cut, professional. The county inspector was topside when it happened. Deputy named Mason Kellum." "Kellum?" Bart laughed. "Big guy thinks he's God's gift to law enforcement." "You know him?" "Repoed his boat last summer. Behind on payments, but somehow came up with the cash right before we took it. The funny thing about that money, it was all 20s, like someone had been saving tip money for years." "Tips?" "Or something else entirely." Bart leaned forward. "Word is, Kellum's got a side business. Traffic tickets disappear for the right price." Inspection stickers get backdated. Nothing major, just small-town corruption. What's that got to do with my wife? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. Bart finished his coffee. Naomi always did play you like a tune, Cal. Even in high school, she had you wrapped around her finger. That stung because it was true. Naomi had been the popular girl who somehow chose the quiet welder over the football stars. Calvin had never understood why, but he'd been grateful enough not to question it. After leaving the diner, he drove past Mason Kellum's house, a ranch-style place with a boat trailer in the yard. The boat was a 20-foot bayliner, newer than anything a deputy's salary should afford. That evening, Calvin found Naomi's iPad charging in the bedroom. She'd left her email open, and curiosity got the better of him. The inbox was mostly boutique business, supplier invoices, customer complaints, social media notifications. But buried in the deleted folder was a thread with someone named MK from MK subject. Weekend plans, can't wait to see you. Hotel is booked under the name we discussed. Bring the documents. From Naomi. Subject, weekend plans. Everything's ready. Cal won't suspect a thing. Once the insurance comes through, we can disappear. Calvin's hands shook as he screenshotted the conversation. Insurance money. Disappearing. The pieces clicked into place like a welder's torch finding its mark. His wife was planning to end him. The next morning, Naomi left for another supplier meeting. This time, Calvin followed at a distance, his work truck staying 3 cars behind her BMW. She didn't drive toward Portland. Instead, she took the river road to Kelly Point, a secluded area where teenagers went to drink and lovers went to hide. Mason Kellum's patrol car was already there, parked behind a stand of Douglas firs. Naomi pulled in beside it. Calvin parked a quarter-mile away and crept through the woods until he could see them. They were in the back seat of Mason's cruiser, windows fogged, the car rocking gently. He took photos with his phone, then retreated to his truck. The evidence was incriminating, but not enough. Adultery was one thing. Attempted ending was another. Over the next week, Calvin began his own investigation. He researched insurance fraud, studied property law, and learned about asset protection. If Naomi wanted to play games, he'd play by rules she didn't know existed. First, he visited a lawyer in the next county over, someone with no connection to Shrouds Point's gossip network. The consultation cost $300, but it was worth every penny. Your wife can't collect life insurance if she's convicted of attempting to end you, the lawyer explained. But proving it is difficult. What you need is leverage. What kind of leverage? Legal leverage, financial leverage, social leverage? Make her need you more than she needs your death. The lawyer helped Calvin establish a limited liability company, then transfer most of their liquid assets into it. The transfers were perfectly legal. Marital property law allowed it as long as both spouses had access to shared accounts. But Calvin was the only one who knew the LLC existed. Next, he visited the county clerk's office and discovered that Naomi had been busy. She'd filed a power of attorney document giving her control over his affairs in case of incapacitation. The signature looked like his, but he'd never signed it. This is from last month, the clerk said. Your wife brought it in personally. Forgery. That was a felony, but instead of reporting it, Calvin made copies and began planning. If Naomi wanted to forge documents, he'd give her more opportunities to hang herself. He started leaving fake paperwork around the house, insurance policies, bank statements, property deeds. All of it carefully crafted to look official while being completely worthless. Meanwhile, he began targeting her boutique. Nothing illegal, just inconvenient. Suppliers received cancellation notices for orders Naomi had placed. Credit card processors got complaints about fraudulent charges. Social media accounts were flooded with negative reviews from fake customers. I don't understand what's happening, Naomi complained over dinner. Someone's sabotaging my business. Maybe it's just bad luck, Calvin said, cutting his steak with deliberate precision. This isn't luck. Someone's targeting me. Who would do that? Naomi stared at him across the table. For a moment, he thought she might confess everything. Instead, she poured another glass of wine. I don't know. 2 weeks later, Mason Kellum made his first mistake. He was following Calvin home from work, staying back but not far enough. When Calvin turned into the old rail yard, where abandoned train cars rusted in the evening fog, Mason followed. The rail yard was empty except for ghosts and scrap metal. Calvin parked beside a decommissioned boxcar and waited. Mason's patrol car pulled up 30 seconds later. The deputy got out slowly, one hand on his service tool. "Evening, Mason." "Draper." Mason's voice was tight. "What are you doing here?" "Could ask you the same thing. I'm conducting surveillance. On me? On anyone who might be involved in illegal activities." Calvin laughed. "Like cutting underwater cables?" Mason's hand moved closer to his tool. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do. You were topside when my ground wire got cut. Only person who could have done it. You're paranoid." "Am I?" Calvin pulled out his phone and showed Mason one of the photos from Kelly Point. "Nice patrol car, very professional." Mason's face flushed red. "You've been following me." "Just documenting public activities." "Nothing illegal about that." "You little peer—" Mason lunged forward, swinging a wild right hook that caught Calvin in the ribs. The punch drove him back against the boxcar, metal ringing like a bell. Calvin ducked the next swing and grabbed Mason's wrist, using the deputy's momentum to slam him face first into the train car. Mason's nose cracked against rusted steel. "Son of a witch!" Mason spun around, a stream of red running down his face. He swung again, this time connecting with Calvin's jaw. The fight devolved into a brutal grappling match among the weeds and broken glass. Mason was bigger and stronger, but Calvin was used to working in tight spaces underwater. When Mason tried to pin him down, Calvin slipped free and wrapped his arm around the deputy's throat. "Give up," Calvin whispered. Mason elbowed him in the ribs and broke free. He scrambled for his tool, but Calvin kicked his legs out from under him. Mason went down hard, his tool skittering across the gravel. Both men were gasping, exhausted. Mason made one last desperate lunge for his tool, but Calvin got there first. He picked up the tool and ejected the magazine, then threw both pieces in different directions. "This is over," Calvin said. Mason wiped the stain from his nose. "You're making a mistake." "No." "You made the mistake when you tried to end me." "I never—" "Save it." Calvin pulled out his phone and called 911. "I need to report an assault by a law enforcement officer." While they waited for backup to arrive, Calvin noticed the security camera mounted on a nearby building. The ATM for First National Bank had a clear view of the rail yard. Perfect. The next day, Calvin visited the bank and requested the security footage. As a customer with an account, he had the right to see any recordings that might show criminal activity affecting his safety. The footage was clear. Mason throwing the first punch, Mason attacking with obvious intent to harm, Mason reaching for his tool when the fight turned against him. Calvin made copies and sent them to the State Police Internal Affairs Division. Mason Kellum was suspended pending investigation. With her lover sidelined, Naomi became desperate. The boutique was failing under the weight of mysterious problems. Suppliers were demanding payment up front. The credit card company had frozen her merchant account pending a fraud investigation. "I need money," she told Calvin over breakfast. "Just a loan to keep the shop running." "How much?" $50,000. Calvin nearly choked on his coffee. "That's a lot of money." "It's temporary. Once I resolve these issues, I can pay you back with interest." "I don't have $50,000. We have it in savings." "No, we don't." Naomi's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" "I mean, our savings account has $1,200 in it?" "That's impossible. We had almost $60,000 last month." Calvin shrugged. "Market fluctuations, investment losses. You know how it is." "Show me the statements." "They're in the safe. Get them." Calvin retrieved a folder of fabricated documents showing devastating losses in various mutual funds and ETFs. The paperwork looked official because he'd copied the format from real statements, just changing the numbers. Naomi studied the papers with growing panic. "This can't be right. We can't have lost everything." "Not everything. We still have the house. The house won't save my business. Maybe it's time to consider closing the boutique." Naomi slammed the papers down. "I won't let 20 years of work disappear because of market volatility." 20 years? You've only owned the shop for 3. I worked for my aunt before she died. This boutique is my life. Then maybe your life needs to change. That evening, Calvin found Naomi on the phone in the bedroom, speaking in hushed tones. "I don't care what it takes," she was saying. "Fix this. I'll make it worth your while." She hung up when she saw him. "Who was that?" "My accountant. Trying to figure out where our money went." "Good luck with that." 2 days later, Mason Kellum broke into Calvin's storage unit. The facility was on the outskirts of town, a collection of metal buildings where people kept things they couldn't fit in their houses. Calvin had rented Unit 47 5 years ago to store welding equipment and scrap material. He discovered the break-in when he arrived to retrieve his underwater torch. The lock had been cut with bolt cutters, and someone had torn through his belongings like a tornado. But they hadn't found what they were looking for, because Calvin hadn't kept anything incriminating there. The real evidence was in a safety deposit box at the bank. He was examining the damage when footsteps echoed through the facility. Mason Kellum appeared at the entrance to the unit, still wearing his deputy's uniform despite being suspended. "Looking for something?" Calvin asked. "You know what I want? The security footage from the rail yard?" "Already sent copies to Internal Affairs." Mason stepped inside the unit, his hand resting on his tool. "I want everything you have. Photos, recordings, documents. Or what? Or I'll make sure you don't live to testify." Calvin smiled. "You think I'm stupid enough to meet you here without backup?" "What backup? Check your phone." Mason pulled out his cell phone. The screen showed 17 missed calls from his sergeant, all in the past 10 minutes. "Seems like someone reported suspicious activity at the storage facility," Calvin said. "Deputy behaving erratically, possible mental health crisis. They're sending the crisis intervention team." "You bastard! You broke into my property." "That's burglary. Add it to the assault charges, and you're looking at real prison time." Mason's face twisted with rage. He drew his tool and pointed it at Calvin's chest. "I should have ended you when I had the chance. Like you tried to do it underwater? That was just meant to scare you. This is different." "No, this is stupid. You shoot me here with your fingerprints all over my stuff after making threats? Even small-town cops aren't that dumb." Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Mason lowered his tool. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." The deputy holstered his tool and walked out of the storage unit. 30 seconds later, 3 patrol cars and an ambulance arrived, but Mason was gone. That night, Calvin found Naomi packing suitcases in their bedroom. "Going somewhere?" "Away. For a while." "How long?" "I don't know." She folded a silk dress with nervous precision. "Things are complicated right now." "Because your boyfriend got himself suspended?" Naomi's hand stilled. "I don't know what you mean." "Mason Kellum." "Deputy Mason Kellum, the one you've been sleeping with?" She turned to face him, and for the first time in months, her mask slipped. The practiced smile was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." "Then you know why I have to leave." "Actually, I don't. Why don't you explain it to me?" Naomi sat on the bed, her shoulders sagging. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "What wasn't supposed to happen?" "Any of it, the affair, the business problems, the what?" "The insurance plan?" There it was, the confession he'd been waiting for. "Tell me about the insurance plan." "Mason said it would be easy. An accident during one of your dives. Nobody would question it. Underwater welding is dangerous." "So you decided to end me." "I decided to be free." Naomi looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Do you know what it's like being married to someone who never talks, never laughs, never shows any emotion? You're like a robot, Cal." "A robot who happens to be good at welding. So you thought you'd upgrade to a corrupt cop. Mason understands me. Mason was using you. No, he loves me. He loves your boutique's money laundering operation." Naomi went very still. "What?" "The cash payments to suppliers, the credit card chargebacks, the mysterious inventory shortages. Your boutique was washing money for Mason's side business. That's not true?" "It's all true. The state police have been investigating Mason for months. They know about the traffic ticket scam, the inspection fraud, all of it. Your boutique was just another piece of evidence." "You're lying." Calvin pulled out his phone and showed her a news article he'd found online. "Mason Kellum, suspended deputy, arrested on federal money laundering charges." Ring any bells? Naomi stared at the screen, her face going pale. "When did this happen?" 2 hours ago. They picked him up at his house. He didn't call me. Why would he?" "You're a liability now." Naomi collapsed back onto the bed, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "What am I going to do?" "You're going to face the consequences. I can't go to prison. You should have thought of that before you tried to end me." I never actually tried to do that. That was Mason's idea, but you went along with it. I was scared. Of what? Of losing everything, the boutique, the house, the life I'd built. So you decided to take mine instead. Naomi began to cry, real tears this time. I'm sorry. No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. Calvin left her on the bed and went to the kitchen. He poured himself a beer and sat at the table, listening to his wife sob in the next room. 20 minutes later, she appeared in the doorway with red eyes and smeared makeup. What happens now? Now you face the music. Will you help me? Help you what? Get through this. We're still married. Calvin finished his beer and looked at the woman he'd once loved. No, we're not. What do you mean? I mean, I filed for divorce 3 days ago. You've been served? I never received any papers. You will. Tomorrow. Naomi stared at him. You planned this. I planned for this. You knew Mason would get arrested. I knew he was dirty. I knew you were involved. I knew it would all come out eventually. So what? You just waited for me to destroy myself? I gave you every opportunity to come clean. You chose to double down. I chose to survive. You chose to betray me. Naomi's tears had stopped. Now she looked angry. What do you want from me? Nothing. I want nothing from you. Then why are we still talking? Because I have one more thing to show you. Calvin pulled out a manila envelope and dumped its contents on the kitchen table. Bank statements, property deeds, insurance policies, business licenses. Your boutique is bankrupt. Your personal accounts are frozen. The house is in foreclosure. Your credit cards are maxed out. Your car is being repossessed tomorrow. Naomi picked up the papers with shaking hands. How did you... I didn't do anything illegal. I just used the power of attorney you forged to protect our assets from your creditors. You can't do this. I already did it. I'll contest the divorce. With what lawyer? You can't afford one. I'll represent myself. Good luck with that. Naomi swept the papers off the table in a fury. You think you're so smart, don't you? I think I'm alive. This isn't over. Yes, it is. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Where am I supposed to go? That's your problem. I have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you tried to do that to me. Naomi slammed the door so hard the windows shook. Calvin finished his beer and went to bed. The next morning, he drove to the bridge where Mason had tried to end him. The repair work was finished, but he brought his welding equipment anyway. He spent the day adding a small plaque to the bridge's superstructure. Nothing fancy, just a simple message etched in steel. Bridges rust, so do promises. As he worked, people from town drove by and honked their horns. Word had gotten out about Mason's arrest and Naomi's involvement. In a place like Shroud's Point, scandal traveled faster than gossip. By evening, the local newspaper had published a story about the corruption case. Mason's mugshot was on the front page, along with a photo of Naomi leaving the courthouse after being questioned by federal agents. Calvin's phone rang as he was packing up his equipment. Cal, it's Bart. Hey. Saw the news. Hell of a thing. Yeah. You okay? I'm fine. You need anything? No, I'm good. Okay, just wanted to check. Take care of yourself. Will do. That night, Calvin sat on his back porch overlooking the river. The water was black under the moonlight, flowing toward the ocean with endless patience. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. You destroyed my life. He deleted it without responding. An hour later, another message. I hope you're happy. Delete. Then another. This isn't over. Delete. The messages kept coming throughout the night, each one more desperate than the last. Calvin turned off his phone and went to bed. 3 days later, Naomi's BMW was repossessed from the Walmart parking lot. She'd been living in the car since the eviction, showering at the gym and eating fast food. Calvin heard about it from Emma, the teenage girl who'd worked at the boutique. It was so sad, Emma said when she stopped by his house to return some equipment Naomi had borrowed. Mrs. Draper was crying when they took her car. She asked if she could get her suitcase out of the trunk, and the repo guy said no. Everything in the car belonged to the bank now. That's too bad. She asked me to give you this. Emma handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words written in Naomi's careful handwriting. I'm sorry. Goodbye. Calvin crumpled up the note and threw it away. A week later, he ran into Mason Kellum at the county courthouse. Mason was there for a preliminary hearing, wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles. Their eyes met across the hallway. Mason's face was pale and hollow, his arrogance replaced by the look of a man who'd lost everything. "Draper," Mason said as they passed each other. "Kellum, this is all your fault. No, this is all your fault. I should have ended you when I had the chance." "Probably." The bailiff pulled Mason away before he could say anything else. Later that day, Calvin received a call from the district attorney's office. They wanted him to testify against Mason in exchange for immunity from any charges related to the money laundering investigation. "We know you weren't involved in the scheme," the prosecutor explained, "but your wife used your joint accounts to process some of the transactions. We need your cooperation to make sure nothing comes back on you." "What do you need me to do?" "Just tell the truth about what you knew and when you knew it." "That's easy. I didn't know anything until I started investigating my wife's affair." "Perfect. We'll be in touch." The trial was set for 6 months later. By then, Shroud's Point had moved on to other scandals. Mason's wife had filed for divorce and taken the kids to California. The boutique building was empty, with a "for lease" sign in the window. Naomi had disappeared entirely. Some people said she'd gone back to her family in Montana. Others claimed she'd left the country. Calvin didn't know and didn't care. He sold the house and bought a smaller place closer to the river. The new house had a workshop where he could store his welding equipment and work on side projects. Life settled into a comfortable routine. Work during the day, reading in the evening, fishing on weekends. He started dating again, nothing serious, just dinner and conversation with women who weren't trying to end him. 6 months after the arrest, Mason Kellum was convicted on 17 counts of corruption and money laundering. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Naomi was never charged. The prosecutors said there wasn't enough evidence to prove she knew about the money laundering operation. She'd been a victim of manipulation, they claimed. Calvin knew better, but he didn't argue. On the day Mason was sentenced, Calvin drove to the bridge where it all started. He brought his welding equipment and spent the afternoon reinforcing the supports where someone had tried to sabotage his work. As he worked, he thought about trust and betrayal, about the difference between loyalty and stupidity. He thought about the brother he'd lost in this same river 10 years ago, and how grief had made him vulnerable to people who saw weakness as opportunity. The sun was setting when he finished. The bridge looked solid, built to last another 100 years. He packed up his equipment and drove home through the quiet streets of Shroud's Point. The town looked the same as always. Weathered houses, rusted cars, people getting by on grit and stubbornness. But something had changed. The whispers followed him now, not with pity, but with respect. People nodded when they saw him, the way they did for men who'd faced trouble and come out stronger. At home, he found a package on his doorstep. No return address, just his name written in careful block letters. Inside was a photograph of a beach somewhere tropical. On the back, someone had written, "Started over, thank you." It wasn't signed, but he recognized the handwriting. Calvin looked at the photo for a long moment, then tore it in half and threw it away. He had work to do tomorrow. A new bridge was being built upriver, and they needed someone who knew how to weld underwater. Someone who could be trusted to do the job right, no matter what. Someone who understood that some things, once broken, could never be repaired. But other things, bridges, lives, trust, could be built stronger the second time around. The river flowed past his window, carrying the past toward the sea. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to prove that some promises were worth keeping. He turned off the lights and went to bed, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. Outside, the bridge stood silent in the darkness, welded tight against whatever storms might come.